right, everybody, welcome back to How I Sell. Today I have a very special guest with us. He is a career salesperson, started at Carta, which is now a massive organization. As the first sales rep, he's hired 150 people there and took 7 different products to market. Crazy growth. He's had a few different sales roles in his past, including stints at Quantcast and a few different banks. I have Mr. Alessandro Chesser with us. Alessandro, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So before we jump into our 5 questions that we ask all of our guests to get an apples to apples comparison on their sales careers, I would love to ask, who is Alessandro Chesser?
Describe me perfectly. Career salesperson. I started selling at 16 years old for a retail bank. If you know anything about retail banks, it's a very aggressive sales environment, especially, before a few years ago when the banks got in trouble for being too aggressive. Selling commodity products, checking accounts, mortgages, credit cards, like every bank is the same product. And, I think I learned very quickly that selling commodity products is not very fun, but you learn a lot about selling, you learn a lot about building relationships. And I think that's really shaped me and who I am today. And I think much of my family comes from the same boat. We're all career salespeople. Most of them do have the same banking background.
Awesome. Well, good to know. Great to know some of your history too. And yeah, those commodity products, from what I've heard, is where you start to sharpen your teeth and really build that foundation as a salesperson. So would love to jump into those 5 questions we ask all of our guests. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
All right. Question number 1. What is the best investment an early career salesperson can do for themselves and why?
I really believe, and I'm not a big reader of books. I don't read a ton of books. I want to read a lot of books, but I just don't have time and I don't put the focus into it. I'm also not a very good reader. I tend to, my mind goes different directions. I tend not to absorb very much. I've always struggled with it. But I have to say the best investment an early salesperson can make is reading a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's the number 1 recommendation that, Henry, my CEO, has given to every single employee that was hired at this company, especially more so in the early days. And he tested us on it. So he made sure that in school, I didn't do a lot of reading. I was able to skirt my way through. But, with this, when he tested us on it and forced us to have conversations on it, I really got a good understanding of it. But I also understood very quickly why it was so important for him to have us read that book. The whole premise is basically if you want to influence people, you have to be a really good person. You have to be genuine, and you have to put yourself in the other person's shoes. You have to understand them and speak in terms of their interest, not your interest. You have to bury your own interests and just understand them. And I think that's the most important skills for a salesperson. I think it's one of the most important skills for life in general. And I think the book talks a lot about that. It's a book that's been written. I think it's roughly 100 years old, but it has a lot of value in today's world.
Nice. I love it. Love the book. Something I read early in my sales career. We'll have to revisit. And something that has come out of, for sure, the pandemic, but I would call it even the last 5 years in tech sales, has been this approach to empathetic sales. I've seen a shift versus when I started in tech sales, around 2010, where it was kind of just dial until you get somebody that's going to speak to you. And now it's really about understanding the position of the organization and the other person on the phone. So I love this advice, and I think it's really sound. It's something that, again, you're not really taught coming out of school or early in your career enough. I love the recommendation, and I think it's really pertinent for folks coming out to read that right away.
It's super applicable for life with relationships. It's hard. It's easy to read. It's hard to remember. When you're talking to people, always put the emphasis on them. Always ask them about things that interest them. Talk, and don't just do it because you're trying to influence them. Do it because you're genuinely interested. If you can do that, if you can be genuinely interested in people and you can get them talking about everything they're interested in, pretty soon they're going to want to listen to you and hear what you have to say, and their guard is going to be completely down. And then you have the opportunity to tell them everything you want and you can influence them. That's the formula. You can't
Yep.
just influence them first. You have to build their trust first, and the number one way to do that is be genuinely interested in them.
Yep. I love it. Genuine interest is critical and key. Don't have a script for yourself, especially in those human-to-human interactions. Don't just list off the same 3 questions you ask everybody. It's miserable, right? That's not how people talk to each other.
Don't be a robot, be a human.
Awesome. Question number 2. What's the biggest surprise you experienced early in your career and why?
I think this kind of relates back to that first question, and the answer for me, I believe that this is something I learned very quickly. Like when I was at my last company, even the company before that, I always noticed that like some of the best sales reps, the ones who always brought in the most revenue, like they didn't talk a lot. They were quiet. And I think what I realized was the best salespeople are not always the best talkers, but they're usually the best listeners. And it's just going back to that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Like, if you want people to trust you, you have to be really good at listening to them and listening to what they want. Like, sometimes their words and what they want don't always connect.
Yep.
Some people have a hard time explaining what they actually want. So you can't just like listen and write down and take notes, and like you can't just like take them word for word. You have to truly understand them. And that goes, you have to read between the lines in order to do that.
That's awesome advice. And I do have an offshoot question on this because it's not always easy. Some folks who are coming up through the ranks here, like a ratio, maybe you talk 40% of the time, they talk 60% of the time, but it's not always easy to live up to that. Do you have a trick or a tip or even a strategy on how to put yourself into that zone where you are actively listening more than you're speaking?
For me, when I do a sales call, I still do a lot of sales calls. I will always do sales calls. It doesn't matter how many people I'm managing. Like, I need to keep selling. Keep going after really big opportunities and trying to prove that like I can add value. Because that's how you get reps to follow you. I think like that's what the best leaders do. For me, the system I try to use for myself is like in the beginning of a sales call, like the first half of a call, I want it to be dominated by the prospect. I want to keep them talking. I want to keep like understanding. I want to make sure that I'm asking really good questions, and they're not the same questions that I ask everybody. They're genuine questions based on what they're telling me. I'm finding the answers based on what they're saying. I'm asking them different questions. Usually, if you can get through, half of the call, like with them just like wearing themselves out, they're going to get to a point where now they're just like ready for you to talk, and they're just like their guard is down, and then you can just like lay it on them. You can be like, I'm a big challenger seller, so then like I make sure to earn their trust first. But then I have no problem like hard selling in the second half of the call. But like I'll never do that in the first half of the call.
Yep. I love it. It's different from what you learn too out in the wild. You see movies where it's the smooth talking, high flying salesperson, Wolf of Wall Street, Glengarry Glen Ross type. But in reality, especially in tech and especially in 2021, it really is that active listener, somebody who's more reserved, potentially more quiet in the first part of the call, who ends up being at the top of the leaderboard. And I've seen it time and time again with the organizations I've worked at. So I'm glad to hear it echoed by you as well.
Super important.
Great. Question number 3. What is one mistake that you made early in your career that shaped the way you operate today?
The biggest mistake I made, and I'm still battling it, is that I've never been great with systems and processes. And so it's kind of opposite. Like some sales leaders, like that's where they make their living. That's all they do, right? I'm the type that will like, I want to spend half my time talking to customers. And like whether it's me on the phone alone with the prospect, or it's like I'm helping my reps close deals and I'm learning what the competition is doing. Like I need to be on the field. And when you do that, and then you're spending a ton of time people managing. You're on regular calls with your reps. You're making them feel better about the fact that like they're struggling. You're helping motivate them, and then you're also dealing with all the internal politics and like you're making sure your forecast meetings are not well prepared for. Like you're making sure that you're good politically and that all the other stakeholders in the organization are not going to like go and do a coup d'etat. Like, and so it's very challenging when, you know, for somebody like myself, a sales leader who likes to be outside so much talking to customers, to focus on systems and processes. And I think even when I was a rep, like I want to spend all my time selling, and like, you know, I was never very good with organization, like throughout my entire life. And like you build bad habits early in your career, and then it becomes tougher to dig out of those holes later in your career. And so like, even though I still want to be focused all my time outside, I think if you put in the right systems and processes, like you don't have to spend that much time on the organization side, versus if you just kind of let it all get buried and like you end up with a ton of, you know, process debt, you know, you're going to be extremely inefficient, and you're always going to be, you know, up late at night doing work.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I see a broad spectrum of folks who are process, non-process, you know, especially at the leadership level. I'm somebody who actually, I'm quite the opposite. I'm somebody who is process driven, and it's just always been natural to me. I would say that the unnatural part for me has been jumping into a role where you're always talking with other people, always talking with salespeople. That's not how I came up through college, you know, as, you know, finance and math focused. So for somebody like you, who's kind of in the opposite bucket, how do you train yourself, or how do you surround yourself with the process people, or at least the knowledge to start developing processes, so you get into a zone where you don't have that process debt in the background?
You know, the most important thing for me is like hire for your weaknesses. So like I know where I'm strong. And you know, I'm also a finance major as well. I always wanted to be the finance spreadsheet person. I just never was good at it. But I think like know where you're weak and hire for your weaknesses. Don't just hire people like you. Like hire for your weaknesses. Build teams around. Like process is important. Hire for that early. And like you need to also have a really good understanding of it. Like to me, like although I'm not going to be the person that goes in and like builds dashboards and like does all that, like I know exactly what I want. Like be sharp with reporting, know the metrics that you're looking to measure your team on. You know, sales can be played like, you know, if you've ever watched the movie Moneyball, like you can collect a lot of data and you can make very important decisions based on that data. And so, you know, I think that, you know, a lot of sales organizations try to say that they're data driven. I haven't actually seen a lot that are data driven. They collect data, but like it's how you use that data. The reason why they don't usually use that data that much is because maybe they don't trust the accuracy in it. So like invest in that early, bring in really good sales ops people, and like pick the metrics that you want to be focused on, and like make sure that you're picking data, building dashboards that you're actually going to be using to make decisions. If you're not going to be making decisions on it, it's really not that important.
Love it. Love it. All very, very sound advice. I learned very early in my career how important and impactful sales operations, and now revenue operations becoming a new category as well, was on a sales team. You think, you know, as a salesperson kind of operating in that those are your quote unquote adversaries because they're telling you what to do and how to do it. But really, they're installing a system that's really powerful and can give you insights into exactly what you should be doing, and not from the angle of, you know, you have to do it. So I totally agree there. And surrounding yourself with people who can complement, you know, some potentially of your weaknesses or things you need improvement on is always great, especially when you're rounding out a team. Awesome. Question number 4. And folks, take this a few directions, but the question is, who has had the greatest impact on your career? If you don't feel comfortable sharing a name, you could go situation. Some people do both, the situation and the name.
Yeah. You know, this is a tough question for me because like I have like 2 or 3 like major influencers. My mom's definitely one of them. You know, I think she's taught me more than anybody. She's the best salesperson I know. But I have to say that Henry, my CEO, current CEO, current founder and CEO, has had the greatest impact on my career, specifically when you're speaking to my career, because he took a shot on me. You know, he let me just like hire and build, and more importantly, I think He's pushed me harder than anybody's ever pushed me in my entire life. He is the ultimate challenger, the ultimate he'll just poke holes in everything that you say, and that has forced me to be bulletproof with anything that I take to him or anything I take to the Carta executive team. I make sure that to battle test all of my arguments. I won't just bring an idea to Henry that I just dreamt one night. I'll talk to, 50, 100 people about it within the organization at all levels and battle test that idea before I take it to Henry. When I take it to him, I'm extremely informed, and he still pokes holes and blows things up. But I've gotten a lot better at that. I think it's made me be a better sales leader, and it's made me be a better salesperson. Aside from that, he's an incredible CEO. He's the ultimate leader. He's smarter than everybody in the room most of the time. And so I think just being around that has, so two things, chances he took on me, the responsibility he's given me for 7 years, and, the kind of the habits that he has and the type of challenger that he is, all of that combined has made him probably, had the greatest impact on my career.
It's awesome. It's really cool that you've gotten the opportunity to be around somebody like that can challenge and poke holes and got you to a point where you do want to, sounds like, run it by so many other parties to even get close to bringing it to him. Question off of this for folks who don't necessarily have a Henry in their lives or someone like your mom in their lives. What do they do? How do they find somebody that's going to be that influencer, that person that's going to shape? And how do you even know when you're in the aura of somebody like that?
I don't know how to answer that question. I think that if you're a new sales rep at a company, your early career, find the people that are success. Find the people that you want to become like.
Yeah.
It may be different for everybody. It may be one of the top sales reps. It may be one of the managers. It may be somebody who's kind of a journeyman salesperson at the company who just has hit quota every single quarter for years. Whoever that is for you. I don't think there's one magic bullet. Here's who you should be associating yourself with. It's who do you want to become like? And then just ask them for a little bit of time and get to know them and tell them that you want to learn from them. I've had a lot of people do that to me over the past 7 years at Carta. Sometimes I just it's so hard. I don't have time for it. It's so but in the end of the day, when people ask you for help, you always want to help them usually.
Yeah.
And so I think those people end up some of them have ended up becoming the top performers.
It's awesome.
They asked me to be a mentor, an informal mentor. They asked me is it okay if I just from time to time, at your convenience, once a quarter, once a month, whatever, just check in with you and ask you questions. Those are the people that rise to the top. They find out who they want to emulate, and then they spend time with them. They're direct. They tell them exactly what they're looking for, just to learn from them.
It's really cool. It's really cool. At the end, you said something that I think has been echoed by other folks that have come on. The best folks in roles and approaching you as, potential mentees or even folks that just want to be around you are the ones that are direct and very clear with their asks. So it's impossible for you as either a manager or you reporting up into somebody for them to know what you want unless you clarify and you say exactly what it is. And I think that's a skill set that has come through from the podcast of, folks who can just be really clear with the ask and what they want and their desires, even if it is, 6 months out, a year out. Those are the ones that generally get ahead, and you have to ask for it. No one's going to know what's going on in your head. Again, not taught as you're coming up through the ranks or as an early career salesperson, early career anything. You're not taught to go out and ask for it. It's okay.
And that translates also into your sales calls. Being direct is the best path of all. When you're direct, People know that you're genuine and they trust you. When you're roundabout, they know right away, and they just get a bad feeling, and they're like less likely to buy your product.
Yep. That's awesome. Very good advice. Okay. The last question before we get you out. If you could go back in time, now that you have the benefit of hindsight, what advice would you give yourself as you were coming up through the ranks and entering into your career?
For me, the most important thing that I struggled with in my early career, as I mentioned, I started selling when I was 16 years old, and been going on 20 years since then. I think it's very important to focus on selling products that you believe in. To the point that you made in the beginning, I also do think it's important to you learn how to sell a product you don't believe in. That's really good sales training. But it's really bad. You can't do that for too long because it will kill your soul. If you're just selling a product you don't believe in, you're lying and you're not going to be able to sleep well at night. And if you truly want fulfillment, you need to be telling the truth. You need to be, if I'm selling a product that I really, really believe in, it's no longer sales for me. It's no longer hard. And that's why in the early days, actually, when I built out the first 10 people on the sales team, I didn't call them AEs. It was actually Henry's idea. We called them evangelists.
Yep.
We wanted to get away from being a sales team. We wanted to be that product evangelist team, a team that really knew what we were selling and really knew that our product can help people. And so we were just preaching to that directly. Actually, it was our head of product that came up with that name. And it makes sense. He's the head of product.
Love it. I think both are really sound too. I have unintentionally been a part of teams where I've hated the product I've sold, and I have unintentionally been a part of teams where I loved the product I sold and then started to become intentional about what products I was selling, probably 4 or 5 years, maybe longer into my career. But yeah, it matters a lot. But there is some, you're right, there is some merit to trying to sell something you don't love to see, to test your chops. But again, you're right there. Any more than a few months, maybe even a year there, you're going to just go, your mind's going to go numb.
That will help you. That will translate to interviews as well. If you're interviewing for a company that you already understand the problem on, and you know that that's a good product, they'll read that in the interview, and you'll have that conviction, and you're much more likely to get hired versus if you just are doing rapid fire interviews all over the place. You're talking to a company that you've read the website. Those are the type of people I try to weed out when I'm in the hiring process.
Yeah, makes total sense. Well, Alessandro, this has been awesome. Where can people find you?
At this point, the social media outlet that I use the least, so I get the least amount of messages, is probably the best place because there's no crowd there. It's probably Twitter. I rarely use Twitter. LinkedIn's a disaster. I get a lot of messages there. I think that's how you message me.
That is, yeah.
Bad there, there's just too much noise. And I don't use it a lot. I don't like social media in general. Twitter is one that I use a lot to get news. I'm looking at the fires going on in Tahoe right now, and so I don't get a lot of messages there. And because of that, it's going to be easier to reach me.
Now you're going to get an army of people flooding your Twitter DMs because of this podcast. So apologize to your DMs. But Alessandro, this has been great. Dropped so much knowledge, so much insight. And our folks here at the How I Sell podcast and our audience are going to love it. So many learnings from the books that you recommend all the way down to some of the actions that you should take and the folks you should align with early in your career. So we really, really appreciate it. Thanks so much for being on the podcast, and we hope to host you again in the not too distant future.
Happy to do it.
All right. Talk soon.